What habit changed your life?
Stacking.
So what's one lesson cancer taught you that nothing else could?
Your body does give you information and messages.
What's one advice do you give most often to leaders today?
To allow their experience to inform like the next stage of leaders.
Welcome to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience with Mike Turner. This show is proudly sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.
Welcome to another episode of I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. I'm Mike Turner, and today's guest is Savio Clemente. He's a TEDx speaker, journalist, best-selling author, and board-certified wellness coach who has interviewed over 2,000 thought leaders, change makers, and even celebrities. But beyond the credentials, Savio's story is one of real resilience, navigating cancer not once, but twice, including a life-saving stem cell transplant that forced him to step away from everything to rebuild from the ground up. Now he's focused on using his voice to help leaders and organizations understand what happens after crisis, how you rebuild, how you lead, and how you find the purpose again. Savio, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on here.
Mike, thank you so much. What a great intro. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely. You know, we've had a couple conversations, a couple missed meetings, but man, finally we're here, and we're really going to get to hear, you know, what Savio has gone through, what's formed him. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what shaped your early life.
Sure. So I actually was not born in this country. I was born in Mumbai, India, which is also called Bombay. And came to the States when I was 3 years old. We settled in a small county in New York called Westchester County. It's about an hour north of New York City.
Okay.
Small little sort of suburban town. A lot of diversity, but, you know, humble beginnings.
Yeah.
And then I went to school in New York City. I studied computer science, information systems, and then I worked. At that time, when the dot-com boom was happening, I was part of the dot-com boom. They was paying us really good money to come and work. And then I was also, unfortunately, part of the dot-com crash. So I worked for a lot of startups, a lot of dot-coms, and I was really proficient and really good at it. I don't know if I loved it, to be honest with you, but I had the wherewithal, and I also had the contacts in order to, you know, rise up. And then I realized throughout that process that it really wasn't completely what I wanted to do. And so I teamed up with a couple of individuals. We started a production company, and it was blood, sweat, and tears. I put a lot of my own financial resources into it. And to be honest, we didn't really make any traction. We had some successes, but really wasn't something that was sustaining. And then what ended up happening in 2014, I ended up facing my first cancer diagnosis. It came out of the blue. I just arrived from a trip with a friend to Europe, and I noticed that I started having drenching night sweats, like where my pillowcase was all wet, my mattress. And I'm like, this is odd. And then also what's happening is that my stomach started getting distended a little bit. I was like, this is odd. So at that time in my life, I didn't really see doctors per se, not because I was hesitant of it. I just didn't need to see doctors. I didn't really have any major medical issues, but I did see a naturopath. And basically a naturopath is someone who analyzes your blood and actually tells you what diet structure to take, what food intake to take.
Interesting.
And so he looked at my blood, and he's like, and at that time I saw him for about 7 years straight, once a year. Yeah. And he's like, oh, Savio, this could be 3 different things, but I think you should go and seek mainstream medicine. Go get a sonogram. I'm like, doc, a sonogram? He's like, yeah. So I went to go get a sonogram, and long story short, they told me to have a relative come pick me up, even though I drove there. I went to the hospital, and they admitted me that same night, about an hour and a half later. And then I heard the nurses talking about transferring me to what they call the 7th floor, and they secretly called it the cancer floor. So I knew I had some type of cancer. I didn't know what it was.
And no one's told you anything at this point. They're rushing you through the process because you're so late in the stages, right?
Yeah. So what was happening is, because of the drenching night sweats, which is a typical sign, now this is after the fact, of lymphoma, your body is just trying to fight off something. And so you're therefore profusely sweating. And then also the stomach distension. So I found out when I was transferred a day later that it was in fact stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. I was bedridden for a week because I had something called ascites, and inside the ascites was a lymphoma. And so they had to distend about 8 liters of fluid. So I was bedridden for a week. And then I was in the hospital for an additional 6 days. And then 2 days before I got discharged, the medical director came and said, listen, we know your health history. We know you're really healthy. We know you, but you have to start something called R-CHOP chemotherapy. She's like, if you don't start it, I don't know where you'll be. I'm like, really, doc? And she's like, yeah, really. I'm like, okay. So I had to really dig deep and figure out for myself what's the next steps. You know, typically when someone finds out they had cancer, they have a buffer time. They have some time to kind of like research and like figure it out. And I didn't. I was just hospital and then choices. But in that, there was a lot of wisdom that I gained and gleaned, a lot of courage that I had to face. And so, you know, we can delve into more of that. But yeah, that was.
Well, let me ask you. So this process, this is the first cancer you're going through. Do you feel like the fact that you didn't have time to really react, you're just going through that, did that serve you well?
Yeah. So this was the time before ChatGPT and
right.
AI,
okay.
where answers came to you quickly. Yes, we had Google. I had Google. I'm not trying to say I didn't. But I that's a great question, actually. I actually think, so I know how my own operating system works, and I'm very decisive. Like you give me choices, I can make a decision right away if I'm informed. So because I didn't know too much about it, I had to actually search deep within. I actually consulted a friend on the phone when I was in the hospital, and she's probably one of the wisest people that I've known. And she said to me, Savio, are you sure you want to put these poisons into your body? She's like, maybe you should just look to see other alternatives. And I will tell you truthfully, I had to sit with that. And it's funny because when you're faced with something as devastating as a cancer diagnosis in a hospital, bedridden, you don't really have too much arsenal. You don't really have too many options. And so what came to me, and it was a dream, it was a flashback to a movie called, and you may or may not have seen it, called Little Buddha. It was starring Keanu Reeves as the Buddha.
I may have caught that.
Yeah.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
I think it was like the late 80s or early 90s. And at the time, I didn't even watch the movie. I watched it when it came out on, VHS. And in the movie, Keanu Reeves plays the Buddha, before he becomes enlightened. So his name is Siddhartha. And Siddhartha decides to give up all his worldly possessions. His father is like a wealthy king. And he decides to give it all up and search for what suffering really is and what's the meaning of life. And so he's meditating there in the movie with 2 other ascetics who basically just live off like 1 grain of rice. And he overhears while he's meditating 2 individuals on a fishing boat. And one of them says, if you hold the string too loose, it won't play. If you hold it too tight, it will snap. The path is the middle way. And it was like a lightning bolt. I'm like, oh, I can say yes to these doctors right here. I can say yes to chemo, and I can do a whole bunch of other stuff when hopefully I get out of this hospital. And so that's what I decided to do. And
so, that is a journey all on its own. You make it through it, you go through the chemo, and I won't bore our audience with chemo because probably a good portion of them have had something in their life or someone they knew that's gone through that. Because cancer is a serious thing. It affects a lot of people. But it turns into something as a blessing, a TEDx opportunity. So let's put a little bit on that. Let's see how'd that turn out? How did that come to be?
Sure. So I decided not to do anything with that experience for 5 years because I kept hearing after 5 years, it's less likely. There's no guarantees, but it's less likely to come back. So I basically did what I needed to do in terms of work. But I'm like, I think I want to do something with this experience. Yeah. And so I waited 5 years, and then I ended up doing a TEDx talk, and it was called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And in it, people are like, what do you mean inner stranger? And I'm like, I left it. I left it on purpose. I left it vague on purpose because I wanted people to really think. And so they're like, well, so what's your inner stranger? And I'm like, I think my inner stranger is that young adult who never really felt rooted or like felt like he belonged. Like I wasn't, I was friends with a lot of different people, so I wasn't an outcast, but I never felt completely attached to things. I always felt like I was floating. And so I'm like, that's my inner stranger. And they're like, oh, and so the person I was speaking to, she's like, oh, actually then my inner stranger is that professional ideal like business person that I just can't seem to reach, or that great mother or that great sibling that I want to be. And I just can't do that. That's my inner stranger. And so in the talk, I really talk about this idea of, it's an acronym, it's a framework called Aloha. And as we know, Aloha in Hawaiian means hello. And so A stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge where you are. And in my situation with cancer, I acknowledge what's happening to me. L stands for listening. So listen to the information that's being gathered and gleaned. In Hawaiian, there's a healing modality called huna healing. And in huna healing, they believe that the body not only sends you sensations like pain, but it also gives you intelligence. It gives you consciousness. There's a voice to it. You just have to be silent and still in order to figure out what that is. And so that's that L's for listening. O stands for opening. So open yourself up to all this information. You're just exploring yourself. It doesn't really matter what belief system you are part of. H stands for harnessing. So harness that information. And A stands for acting. But I always tell people with the caveat to act with courage, because it takes courage to change. The research points to the fact that it's not that people don't want to change, it's that they don't know how to change. So in other words, they don't know if they're contemplating change, wanting change, they're now in change, or they're thinking of relapsing. And so that's really the process that I used. And so I was thinking to myself, in that experience of going through cancer the first time, what was it like? And so I was invited on the stage in Raleigh, North Carolina to give that TEDx talk. And then, as we know, the story goes that I was cancer-free for another 5 years. And then unfortunately, literally a decade later to the month, I had a relapse of cancer. And that in and of itself is an interesting story.
Yeah. And so this is the second time you're going through cancer. Obviously at this point, it starts turning into, you have doctors involved, you have a lot of people involved in your well-being at this point. So it wasn't something that came to a surprise to you. I mean, it was probably picked out pretty quick based on tests you had to run. I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I decided every year to get blood work. After 5 years, they told me, we like seeing you, but you don't have to come. And I'm like, can I just come from our own mental? He's like, yeah, you could come. So I did my blood work for 2024, and he said, okay, everything's fine. He's like, I'll see you in a year. And I'm like, well, wait, hold on, doc. I said, just to let you know, I came back from a trip. I went to India and I covered 8 cities as a journalist. And so I came back from the trip and I'm like, I've just been noticing that I've been having like intermittent ear fullness and a little bit of nasal congestion. He's like, okay. I'm like, I'm going to go see an ENT in the city. And he's like, okay, just tell him to send over, the stuff I put in your file. I'll see you next year. Have a good life. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah. So I go see an ENT and he's like, wait, there's a lot of inflammation in your right nostril. He's like, Savio, you're a B-cell lymphoma survivor, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm almost hitting a decade. And he's like, do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity? I'm like, what? Because Mike, when I had cancer the first time, I asked the oncologist, I'm like, how would I ever know if it came back? Because I don't want to be someone who's like a nervous Nelly and constantly thinking like it's a cancer back. He goes, typically it's going to come back in the same spot. So for you, it would most likely be in the stomach. So when I went to my ENT, I didn't even think about cancer. I just thought he was going to give me nasal medication. So anyway, the ENT's like, listen, I've been burned as a doctor before. And I remember those words very deeply. He's like, let's do an MRI. So he did an MRI. He's like, yeah, it looks a little strange. He's like, let's do a biopsy. And I did a biopsy, and I remember Friday, 3 p.m., I get the MyChart notification, tells me I had a relapse. And the next day was supposed to be my 25th college reunion, whom I emailed a whole bunch of people who wanted to see me. And truthfully, I didn't have the courage or the stamina or the desire to go and fake it. So I didn't go.
You're just like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone's giving you your space. You're going to go through this process again. So we start that process. Talk me through that. So you got to go meet with your oncologist. You got to get a plan together.
Well, he was off that day at Friday at 3 p.m.
Of course he is.
But his team knows me, right? And so they're like, listen, we'll let me just email him for you. He literally calls me 2 hours later. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, this is happening. He's like, that's really odd. She said, can you send me the scans? And that's the thing. And a few people disagree with me. They don't want to know. I want to know because knowledge, to be forewarned, is to be forearmed. So I'm that type of person. So I was able to easily send him those scans. And he's like, oh, actually, I know this radiologist. He doesn't make mistakes. He's like, that's the first thing he said to me. He's like, I actually know this radiologist. He's excellent at his job. So he's like, okay, come in Monday. And he literally spent an hour and a half for me talking about the grueling treatment plan. It wasn't as simple as getting chemo. It was literally 3 day stays in the hospital. Then I had to inject myself for about a week or two in order to stimulate my stem cells. Then I had to come in and get a neck catheter and be put side by side by a machine, 6 to 7 hours. Sometimes some people take a few days. For me, fortunately, it was a day. Then I had to do 3 weeks in the hospital. It ended up being 4 weeks. It ended up being 4 weeks because I ended up having tachycardia. They give you back your stem cells. And then I came out of that whole experience. I did scans. Fortunately, I got a CR, which is complete response to treatment. They also call it a complete remission, but I don't use the word remission anymore, as you can imagine why. Yeah. And so my oncologist was like, listen, there is a clinical trial. There is an immunotherapy, which basically stimulates your immune cells. You don't have to do it. It's kind of like an emergency, sort of like a backup, just in case. And so I decided to do it. My sister was like, why would you do something like that? You just came out of like months and months and months and months of treatment. I said, because if it ever came back, I would say to myself, I should have done the last stage of it. And so I went through that. And then I did about 5 months of physical therapy. And I'm here to tell the tale. One night in the hospital because of the tachycardia, because of the pulse, my pulse would go like 160, 170 every time I would stand up. They had to rush me to ICU to get norepinephrine. So everyone was nervous about the whole experience. I was in a quarantine room. And the thing they don't tell you about stem cell transplants is that after they give you your own, so I got my own stem cell transplant. You can get a donor stem cell transplant. Is that
you got yours back?
I did. They count the days after it. And they actually said to me, this is your second birthday. And I thought they were like joking with me. And they're like, no, this is an actual it's called a medical rebirth. You are actually physically, you are a different person because and I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. They're like, you have 2 birth dates. So now I like to joke around and say I have my actual birth date in the winter, and now I have my other birth date in the summer.
So and I'm listening to your story, and I'm saying, I know that these decisions didn't come lightly, but you bought into the Western medicine. I mean, people don't get stem cell treatments without some level of buy-in. And obviously I'm looking at this and I'm going, man, that first cancer. So interesting enough, you go through cancer once, you go into remission, and then 10 years later, you're again, but now you're a little more open to some procedures, some things that are going on. So how did that kind of come about? Where did the openness come out? Or did you just still continue to use other alternatives, or how were you bought in?
So the first time I had cancer, I actually, for myself, wanted to not only do the middle way thing that I mentioned, but also to a degree say to myself, well, what do I have at my disposal? What options besides this? So truthfully, I had to do R-CHOP chemotherapy every 3 weeks. In between those 3 weeks, I did a whole bunch of integrated modalities. I just searched, and it was like the kitchen soup type of situation because I didn't know what I was facing. It was the first time. No one in my family had this, and I just wanted to find a way through it. And so that's what I did. Second time around, because it was so involved and there were so many steps, I can't even tell you how many PET scans, CT scans, MRIs, bone marrow aspirations. By the way, they're really painful to get, and I ended up having to get like 3 over the course of 16 months of treatment. I knew that I had to give this like 100%. So I put my whole work, everything that I do, on hold. But I will say, after I got out of the hospital and all that, I did know they kept saying it takes about a year or 2 for the body to reconstitute itself. So I looked into everything that you could think of with healing. I looked into it. Literally, I did things like ecstatic dance. Like I did things like internal family systems, OMM, which is like osteopathic manipulation medicine. I literally did it all. The only thing I didn't do, Mike, was psychedelics. And that's because that was a conscious choice, because I'm a firm believer, if you open any door in life, you have to be responsible as to what you're opening. And I didn't want to open that door to the mind, because the mind really wasn't in trauma. It was the physical body that was in trauma in terms of the cancer. And I didn't think I even needed that healing, because I have interviewed individuals who are in that space. And I believe there's positive benefits to that if you need that. To me, this is not a joyride. I'm not trying to just, do stuff to do stuff.
You're not trying to open up some creative portal and some enlightening opportunities to better your iPhone. Okay, so let's walk through this a little bit, because I think one of the things is you also had the journey in this process of faith. So your values, your belief system, there's a lot of tug and war, a lot of things going on. So you've explored multiple belief systems, from Catholic roots to Buddhism. And so talk to me, did you evolve? How did this kind of this process come about?
Yeah. So I would like to say that I had a great foundation. So I was raised in a Catholic household. I was an altar boy for like 6 years. I went to Catholic elementary school, and that gave me a huge foundation. But in college, I knew I had to explore other things. It was just a yearning of mine. So like you said, I explored everything from Buddhism to Jewish mysticism, all the way to Vedic philosophy. This is over the course of like 20 plus years. So this isn't like I just studied.
The tools are being built before this process.
Absolutely. And so for me, it was just a couple of little things that, not little things, but little things in theory that compound over time. And so one of the things that really helped me was this sinking into this idea of silence and stillness. I alluded to it earlier. Yeah. And in a quarantine room, thankfully it was, controlled with the noise, because I am a little sensitive to noise, really helped me really understand there's power in that. And also not only power in that, but there's also wisdom in that. But not only wisdom in that, but there's also healing in that, because that was available to me anywhere, anytime. I could rest into it, rest out of it. And it really gave me the idea to say two things. One, there's the Savio that's in bed, right, where people are checking my vitals and giving me all these medicines and whatnot. But then there's this other side of me that's like my mental acuity is still active. I still have a vibrant spirit, or at least I feel that way. My emotional center is still sort of straight and focused. And so that really helped. And then also something that I did the first time I had cancer is that I immediately reframed the chemo. I didn't see it as a poison. I saw it as an elixir. I saw it as, they call it mana from the universe, the life force from the universe, because I knew I had to submit and I had to surrender to that. Otherwise, I'm not allowing what it's medically and scientifically designed to do. I'm not allowing that to enter. And I'm not trying to minimize the terrible things that chemo does do to your body. I'm not trying to minimize the fact that it takes away your hair, especially for women. It's a very sensitive thing. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't make you lethargic and you're vomiting and diarrhea and just feeling yucky. I'm not minimizing that at all. I mean, this is someone who's been through cancer now twice. So I want to be really respectful of the fact that, especially when it comes to organ cancers, people are losing body parts because of cancer. So that's a serious thing. And then really another thing that I did is they call it psychological distancing. And I know a lot in my trainings. I'm a board certified wellness coach. I'm a journalist who's interviewed, like you said, over 2,000 individuals. I'm a keynote speaker. And so I knew for myself that I had to create a buffer between the disease and my identity. And so that buffer really allowed me to gain perspective, because every time the doctors would come in, even though I was really, really tired, I made sure that I met them where they were. I made sure that my energy was focused on a collective healing rather than them healing me, that I was allowing that conversation to unfold together, because I believe, and I will die on this sword, that healing is not linear. As much as modern medicine, mainstream medicine has saved me, and as much as integrated medicine has also helped me in terms of a wellness perspective to feel better and feel good,
Right.
healing is up and down, left and right. It's not one way or the other. It's a combination of things that you have to figure out. And it can get really sad. It can get really depressing. It can get really hopeful, but then also it could get really, really disappointing. And so at the end of the day, I tell anyone who's listening who knows a loved one or they themselves are going through, my situation is cancer. It could be anything, heartbreak, job loss, or closure, whatever it is. Mine happens to be this dramatic. But I tell people all the time, you have to find perspective, because I think a lot of us, including myself, are really good at talking about how this is affecting me, our subjective, but rather than talking about the objective aspect of it. What's actually happening in this situation? And a lot of people, and it's a controversial thing because a lot of people are saying, well, cancer is a blessing to me. And some people say cancer is definitely not a blessing to me, but I did learn something from it. At the end of the day, wherever you stand on it, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how are you going to take what's happening to you right now, be fully present in that moment, and figure out a way forward, whatever that way is. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And it's not even win or lose, meaning life or death. Some things don't work and some things do. I'm still going through a little bit of neuropathy because of all the treatments that I've been under. And of course, because of the cardiomyopathy and the heart issues, but it's you take the good, you take the bad.
Right. And you are the kind of guy that's gonna take this head on and go at it. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think it behooves us to do that. Don't you agree? Because at the end of the day,
so.
and it's not like you have to rah your way through it. That's not even,
No.
it's not a masculine type of energy that you have to give. It's more of, I would say, I liken into that you have a choice. And what are you in control of? Mike, do I really control my red blood cell count? No. Do I really control my platelets? No. My red bloods? No, I can't control any of that. But I can control what I can control. And that is how I feel about myself, how I feel about the situation, what reality is actually happening in my life, and being informed as to what the doctors are saying and as to what actually feels right. So I often tell people when it comes to decision making, I talk a lot about this with healthcare leaders, it's that when the decision making comes, you always have to have a filter. It doesn't, just because that information came through doesn't mean it's actually filtering correctly at you. So I often tell them, like, think of it like a shower that's trickling down. It's trickling down to your mind, trickling down to your heart space, trickling down to your gut. What's actually happening with that information that's being given to you and gleaned to you? Because a lot of times, especially with healthcare leaders, they're like high stakes. They're not only dealing with themselves and their team and their organization, they're dealing with another human being. And if they make a decision or a decision that's not correct, it affects the whole situation.
So true. So you're now speaking to executives and organizations, or you're starting to really pivot that way. You're doing these public speakings again. You're kind of trying to get back, to it and try to really build the strength and just kind of get back to life. So what does leadership look like for someone who's gone through a real crisis like this?
Yeah. So most people think that you have to just survive the crisis. And I'm here to tell you that it's not about surviving the crisis. It literally is what comes after. That's when you either win or lose, because you have to regain clarity and composure when the disruption is happening, but it hasn't really gone quiet. It's just gone internal. And that's where, performance is either lost or won. And so for the most of the time, when it comes to especially healthcare executives and I'm on keynote stages, they're often say to themselves, well, how do I balance the two? How do I come to terms with my professional leanings, right? My credentials, my role, and how do I serve my patients, the organization and the team? And it reminds me of something. So right before I had my relapse, my editor gave me a choice assignment. It's not my beat. I cover pretty much health, wellness, and leadership. And he's like, Savio, I have an assignment. He's like, would you like to go and cover the Oscars red carpet? I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, do you want to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to do it. So I went there. I had a friend who lived in LA, so he took me to Venice, and Venice and Malibu. I've never been. So this was before the fires. And it was a great time, great weekend. And I'm there. I'm with a whole bunch of other journalists, really, huge entertainment.
Right.
And the celebrities are coming. And I realized something, Mike. I realized they're still acting because they're showing great face with me as a journalist, a great face with the photographer and their handlers and the managers. And it reminded me, and this is what I speak of, is the fact that I think all of us lean on that wisdom and that hard-earned intelligence and all the trainings that we've done, but we lose a little bit of the humanity aspect of it. Yeah. And we then end up sinking into and falling into roles that are not only inauthentic, but not really serving anyone because you're trying to serve a general thesis of people rather than serving the person that's right in front of you. And so that was a great lesson for me. But of course, my brain works a little different. I just don't, like a friend of mine was like, only you would be thinking this deeply about it. It's like, Savio, it's just a red carpet. Who cares? I'm like, yeah, I know, but that's how my brain is.
Yeah. And so, man, this process has really stifled your voice, that whole period. So what does it mean to you to reclaim it now?
Yeah, it's very empowering, but I do know, and I don't live in fear, but I do know that when it comes to cancer, and like I said, mine is very dramatic. This could be anyone's situation, that we're only given what we're given, right? A lot of us want more, and I think wanting and needing more is fine, but I'm not really attached to a lot. Not that I am detached, because that's the other danger, is to be completely detached, and I don't want to be that person. So I want to live in that, that middle ground there. But it also allows me to really figure out for myself that all the stuff that I've learned, all the stuff that I've done, what does it actually mean in the long run if it doesn't really affect the people that it needs to affect? What's the point of writing all these content that I produce? And right now I'm actually running a interview series with CEOs and CMOs. And it's interesting because a large portion of what they speak about is really about this idea of waste. Like right now in the US, it's reported that there's about $935 billion in healthcare waste. Now you think to yourself, if that's just equipment, no, that's human bodies. That's human leverage. That's people making decisions that are not active. In the industry, we talk about these things like strategic reversals and increasing ramp and all these wonderful terminologies that are being used. But at the end of the day, what does it actually boil down to? What is it actually producing or not producing? What are the advancements that are being made and not made? And so getting that perspective and insight from these executives in that C-suite arena is really fascinating to me, because from that, I then use my own synthesis of how can this work better? How can we actually produce better results for a larger swath of the population?
Well, and I will say too, part of this too is we got to get the insurance companies out of the mix of this for sure. I think we need to bring humanity back into the healthcare system. And that's just my tidbits of a plug there, because I feel like if we could do that and we can get to that point, I know that's a hard push, but it's that right there is a big game changer.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because at the end of the day, what's happening now? We have disruption, not only politically, socially, we have it in technology with AI. So now there's this big push, right? I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I'm like in these rooms with these like journalists and like writers, and they're like, I'm a purist. I will never use AI. I feel guilty. I'm like, guilty? I'm like, if you use the word guilty with anything in life, you have to, as Yoda would say, search your feelings on that, because the word guilt attached to anything is not really a good thing. At the end of the day, AI is just a tool. And so I agree with you. We have to bring humanity back. How do you do that? You have a quote unquote opponent, which is AI, saying, no, I can actually artificially create content and do these things. And then you're getting these people like, no, I want the human touch. And so maybe that's where we'll get to. I completely agree with you. I just think it's interesting how life and situations now dovetail that. And I hope that endeavor, does work. Absolutely.
I really do believe that technology will push us forward in a good way. I'm an optimist. I have to believe that. That's the only way that I can live and wake up in the morning, is knowing that we are moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so we reached that part of our show where we have some quick fire questions for you. So I'm going to shoot a couple at you.
Okay.
So what habit changed your life?
Stacking. Habit stacking. Yeah. It literally, I will stack a whole bunch of things into my day that are the same thing. So for example, if I'm doing admin tasks, like the whole day is pretty much admin in different parts or sections of my job. And then like podcasting or interviewing, I'm like literally stacking it. People are like, how? I'm like, because for me, the visual and the way I work is it's like revving an engine. So now the engine is revved. Now I'm just going to use it till it depletes towards the end of the day. And so that's a game changer for me for sure.
I am definitely going to have to take that because I'm kind of built that way too. Like admin stuff, if I'm doing invoicing or whatever, that should really happen on a particular day for me. Because for me to shift mindsets, turn around and do governance, risk, and compliance, or AI integrations or something like that, is a whole different mindset. So I'm going to start making certain days those habit stacking.
Yeah, and one of the things that really got me to the point is that what was happening to me is that if I didn't do that, this was early on, I ended up feeling like I had to be an identity. Like, for example, I'm doing podcasts today. I'm the podcast person. Or like, let's say Wednesday, I am doing my interviews with the CEOs. And what ended up happening is that I ended up being like fractured. I wasn't being unified. Instead of saying, and the hack for me was this, and this is something that I gleaned and I leaned into, was the fact that I'm expressing all my arsenal of talents into different doors. So I'm the same unified person, but I'm just expressing myself differently that day, rather than saying I had to be the podcast person, or the journalist person today, or the TEDx speaker today. And so that really was the genesis of the habit stacking.
So what's one lesson cancer taught you that nothing else could?
So I'm going to give you two answers. The simple answer is, and I hope people really lean into this, your body does give you information and messages. It really, really does. It might not speak, it might not have a voice, but it's actually telling you something. And it reminds me of something Oprah said a long, long time ago, back in, I think, the 80s or 90s, was that life will send you a pebble, it will send you a stone, it'll send you a rock, and will send you a boulder. When it sends you a boulder, you know you went too far. And that's when the gap, the chasm, and I speak a lot about this on my keynotes, it's like drift and the chasm, and it just gets bigger and bigger until you can't, it's just too hard. So that's number one, listen to your body. But I would say the second thing is that no matter what's being sent your way, and this might sound a little hokey, it is possible if you allow yourself the permission to lean into the discomfort of it. Instead of trying to avoid what's actually happening and the pain that's involved in it, why not just sink into it and lean into it? And the only way to do that I know that's easy, cheap, is silence and stillness. However you want to cultivate that, whether that's prayer, I'm a big meditator, meditate, journal, breathing exercises, taking a walk, and whatever works for you. I think that's really the key there, because experts and people, the external world can tell you a lot, but your internal operating system is really the one that really makes that decision. Because, and this goes back to on what I speak about, which is really this idea of adaptive resilience framework, is that the world and situations will send you those signs, signals, and patterns. It's just for us to try to unravel them and see what actually makes sense and what doesn't.
Awesome. That hits hard. What's one advice do you give most often to leaders today?
The one advice that I give leaders most often today is to allow their experience to inform like the next stage of leaders. So in other words, don't sort of keep that intelligence or that wisdom thinking that your competitor is going to one-up you. Give freely of it, because ideas are like a river. I'm really big into the examples that Eastern philosophy tells you, which is the seed never rushes and the river never rushes either. The river knows its direction. The seed knows how to germinate and how to become the flower or the plant. We are the ones who try to quicken that process, but it has its own timeline. And I think when you give freely of that information, not only do you get individuals who align or resonate to it, it actually makes you more magnanimous, and a lot more opportunities come from it. Thinking versus the thinking that we have to hoard everything.
Well, and you're also in a much different place if you feel like you need to hoard that information because you're not secure in your position, or that you're not secure in what's going on in your career. So
Well,
I think there's a lot to be said about that. So
yeah, I mean, I can even speak to just generally. I mean, I'm a board certified health and wellness coach, but health and wellness are like siloed. They really are. And I'm not trying to say it's a lot of things with wellness that's questionable, but there's a lot of things with healthcare that people are just not trustful of. And so I think they need to speak to each other in a more humane way. And how do you do that? You share information rather than thinking that they're wrong and they're right. I'll give you a classic example. My sister and I have two sisters. She's on the completely different political spectrum as me. And I'm someone who's always very respectful, but it created a lot of tension for many years. But after my stem cell transplant, Mike, I realized something. I realized that her and I are not going to shift. Like, I have my own, and I'm like, well, how can we come to an understanding here? So I was like, okay, well, what can we agree on? My parents are both alive. We both love them. So we talk about them.
Okay.
We talk about travel, and we talk about food. And so let's agree on things that we agree on, and the other things that we can't, then we just have to live with.
yeah, just take the polarization out of it, right? I mean, that's the key. I think, believe it or not, in this world, we as a society and humanity have a lot more in common than we give ourselves credit for. So if someone's listening, feels stuck in their career, healthcare leader, is going through a journey and they just don't have the answers, what's the first step they should take?
I would say the main thing that's happening with, especially the leaders I work with, and especially in healthcare, is this cognitive overload, cognitive pressure. It's just constantly there. It's this quiet nagging that's never spoken about because it's part of the job or part of the system or part of the work. And at the end of the day, I think the number one thing to do is do what I tell people to do, especially in my Aloha reboot, is do a brain dump of actually what's actually happening to you physically, emotionally, spiritually, even in your dreams. Just write it all down. And if you don't have time for it to make sense, then use AI because it's a tool to help you organize that properly. But I think that's the number one thing, is that I don't think we allow ourselves to actually examine the core essence of what's our driving motivations. We always want to win, to fix, to heal. And that's wonderful. I'm not saying to not make progress. Progress is, but sometimes the progress happens in the recovery. It happens when nothing else is happening, because that's the magic of life. I mean, if so many things happen just because we did it all, everyone would be successful. But that's not the way it works. It's just this mysterious mystery. And I think but it helps us, though, if we get to know ourselves a lot deeper and a lot better in that way. A lot of people, like men are joining men's groups, women are joining their little circles, whatever really works for you. I'm not someone who always says to do one particular thing, because not only does it not resonate, it's just not going to last over time. It's like the idea, like a motivation and inspiration. People always say, oh, you're a motivational speaker. I'm like, if you want to call me a motivational speaker, that's fine. But that's not it, because the research has pointed out that motivation only lasts a finite amount of time. I would rather actually make concrete changes to help leaders and organizations change the way it is, because what's a leader? A leader is just someone you want to emulate, you want to embody, you want to follow, you want to be. And leaders have the great advantage of allowing, once again, that trickle down idea of going into not only themselves and their team and the organization, but trickle down into the community, to their family, into their relationships. That's how you create real change. And so that's what I get excited about.
Oh, I love that. You sum it up so well. So where can people connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. They can find me very easily on my website. So it's savioclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE.com. On there, I have my keynote work, have a few few options available, few slots available for 2026. I have my TEDx talk on there. I have my book that I did about 4 years ago on there as well. And then every Wednesday, I release a content on my Substack newsletter. So right now I'm running that series, but also this week coming up, I have one where I got invited to do an omakase tasting. And in the tasting, it was 19 separate tastings. I actually talked about leadership and how I saw leadership being exemplified in this little small 12-seat omakase. And so I talk about head, heart, and gut intelligence as well, which I call the 3 brains in that newsletter. And then if anyone wants to follow me on social media, I'm at all the social channels at The Human Resolve. And I call it The Human Resolve because what else do we have but the idea of resolve and resolution in our lives?
Thank you so much, Savio, for being on my podcast. Man, it was a real honor, privilege to have you on here. Just awesome. Awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
So if you're like this show, please share it with others. I would really appreciate it. If it resonated with you, please reach out, let us know. Again, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks for listening to I'm Up, He Sees Me, I'm Down. Follow the show for more conversations on leadership, faith, and resilience. Sponsored by Alamo Tech and Mission Solution Partners.